My phone lit up at 2:17 a.m. Not a text, not a voicemail, a call. And for one sharp second, my body knew before my brain did. I sat up so fast my sheets tangled around my legs. Dad flashed across the screen. I answered on the first ring. Dad? There was breathing. Ragged, shallow, like someone had been running but hadn't moved. Then his voice low, tight, furious with himself. Don't freak out. My stomach dropped. Dad, what happened? A pause. A long one, and then barely above a whisper. I fell. Everything in me went cold and hot at the same time. Are you bleeding? Did you hit your head? I'm fine. He snapped too quick, too automatic. I'm just on the floor. On the floor, in the middle of the night, I swung my legs off the bed. My feet hit the carpet, and the room tilted with adrenaline. Where are you? The bathroom. Can you get up? No. One word. Heavy. Final. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, like I could hold him upright through sound alone. Dad, I'm calling 911. No. The way he said it flat and absolute hit something deep in my chest. Dad, I said no. His breath shuddered. I don't need strangers in my house. I just need a minute. A minute. As if minutes were harmless. I stared into the dark, hearing what he wasn't saying. How long had he been there? How long had he tried and failed to stand up? Dad, I said carefully, slow, like I was talking to a wild animal that might bolt. How long have you been on the floor? Silence. Then softer, like he hated the truth. Since after midnight. My throat tightened. That's not a minute. That's an hour, 2, maybe more. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound like panic. I'm coming right now. Don't move. Don't try to stand. I'm not helpless, he muttered. I didn't answer that. Because the thing about helplessness is you can be furious about it and still be it. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys. My hands shook so hard I dropped them once, metal clattering against my nightstand like an alarm. In the car, the world looked wrong, empty streets, traffic lights changing for nobody, the glow of convenience stores like little islands. My dad lived 26 minutes away. 26 minutes felt like an entire lifetime. I kept thinking about all the times I'd offered help. A cane, a grab bar for the shower, a medical alert button, and every time he'd said the same thing, half joking, half warning. Don't make me old. When I pulled into his driveway, his porch light was on. He never left it on. My heart pounded as I ran to the front door, then froze because the door was unlocked. That was new. Inside, the house smelled like old coffee and the lemon cleaner he used when he was nervous. The hallway was dark. Dad, I called. His voice came from the back, strained and furious. Back here. I rushed down the hall and found him in the bathroom doorway. Not in the bathroom. In the doorway, half in, half out, like he tried to crawl toward the hall and didn't want to admit it. He was on his side. One arm braced under him. The other, trembling. His face was pale. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. And his eyes were wide, not with pain. With humiliation. Hey, I said, too softly, like he might break. I'm here. I told you not to freak out, he snapped. I crouched beside him, scanning his forehead, his hands, his knees. A dark bruise was blooming along his cheekbone. My stomach lurched. Dad, your face. It's nothing. It wasn't nothing. And we both knew it. I reached for him. He flinched. Don't, he said. Dad, I have to check you. I said don't. His voice cracked on the last word. And right then, I realized something that scared me more than the bruise. This wasn't just a fall. This was my father who had built a life on being the one who lifted others up, lying on a bathroom floor, and fighting me harder than he'd fight the injury. I swallowed, keeping my hands close to my knees, non-threatening. Okay, I said, no touching, just talk to me. Can you move your legs? Yeah. Can you feel your toes? He flexed them, angry, like he was proving a point. See, I'm fine. I nodded slowly. Then, as gently as I could, Dad, I'm still calling 911. He stared at me, and in his stare was a message so clear it almost didn't need words. If you do this, you'll change something between us. My thumb hovered over my phone screen. I didn't want to be the kid who betrayed him, but I also didn't want to be the kid who found him too late. I hit call, and my dad closed his eyes like I'd just taken something precious away. Chapter 2. I'm not ready for help. My dad didn't used to be like this. Not the stubborn part, he was always stubborn. But the fragile kind of stubborn, the kind that comes from fear. After my mom died, it was like he turned grief into a job. He rebuilt the deck by himself, replaced a water heater without calling a plumber, shoveled snow before sunrise because he didn't want the neighbors to worry. When I offered to help, he'd wave me off with that tight smile. I've got it. When I pushed harder, he'd joke. What's next? You gonna pick out my casket too? He said it like a punchline, but there was always something underneath it. A warning. Don't look at me like I'm disappearing. 6 months ago, I noticed the first real sign. It wasn't the limp. He'd had that for years old football injury, he liked to say. It was the way he stood up from the couch. Slow, careful, a little unsure. He caught me watching and snapped, What? Nothing. I lied. He narrowed his eyes. Don't start. That was the phrase. Don't start. Don't start talking about walkers. Don't start offering rides. Don't start rearranging his life like furniture. I tried anyway, softly at first. Maybe we could install a rail in the shower, I said one Sunday while we ate takeout Chinese on paper plates. He didn't even look up. No. Dad, it's just, no, he repeated firmer. Those rails are for people who can't take care of themselves. I stared at him. You think you're taking care of yourself by slipping in the shower? He set his fork down slowly, like he was setting down a weapon. I think, he said, controlled, that once you start adding things like that, it doesn't stop. I waited. He didn't elaborate, but he didn't have to. We both knew what he meant. First, the rail, then the cane, then the just-in-case nurse visits. Then someone suggesting it's not safe to live alone. Then, the word he hated more than pain, facility. So I backed off. Like he trained me to. He still drove himself to the grocery store. Still insisted on mowing the lawn. Still carried heavy bags like it was a competition with time. And I let him because I was tired. Because I had my own kids, my own job, my own bills. Because part of me wanted to believe, if he believed hard enough, it would stay true. He was fine. And then, the night he fell proved what I didn't want to admit. Belief doesn't keep bones from breaking. Chapter 3, The Sound of Sirens. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. 8 minutes that felt like a countdown. 2 EMTs came in, one older, one younger, calm voices, practiced eyes. They asked questions my dad hated. Sir, what's your pain level? Did you lose consciousness? Can you tell me what day it is? Dad answered like he was being interrogated. 2. No. Tuesday. It was Wednesday. I saw it on the younger EMT's face, just a flicker, just enough to tell me he noticed. My dad noticed him noticing, and the humiliation turned into anger. I said I'm fine, Dad snapped. The older EMT nodded like he'd heard this 1,000 times. Okay, sir, we're just here to make sure you stay that way. They helped Dad sit up. The moment he shifted his weight, his face tightened. He hissed through his teeth one sharp breath that was pure pain. I leaned forward instinctively. Dad shot me a look. Don't. I sat back. The younger EMT lifted Dad's pant leg gently, and I saw the swelling in his ankle, ugly and fast. We need to take you in. the EMT said. Dad shook his head. I'm not going to the ER for a sprain. The older EMT held Dad's gaze. Falls can be more than sprains, especially at night. Especially at night. Like the dark itself had teeth. Dad's jaw flexed. Fine, he said finally, like he was granting permission, but I'm not staying. They placed him on a stretcher. The sound of the straps tightening felt wrong, like I was watching someone tie down a piece of his identity. In the ambulance, I sat on the bench seat, hands clenched in my lap. Dad stared at the ceiling. Quiet. Too quiet. Then, without looking at me, he said, "You shouldn't have called." My throat tightened. "Dad, you were on the floor for 2 hours." His eyes shut. I would have gotten up. The lie was small, but it was a lie. And that's what terrified me, because it meant he'd rather rewrite reality than admit he needed help. The siren wailed once as they crossed an intersection, and I felt my own guilt rise like nausea. If I'd pushed harder months ago, if I'd installed the rail, if I'd convinced him to wear an alert device, would we still be here? Dad's voice cut through my thoughts. Low. "Don't you start blaming yourself," he said. I looked at him. His eyes were still closed, but it was like he could feel the guilt vibrating off my skin. I lied. He opened one eye, just barely. "Yeah," he said. "You are." And then the ambulance doors opened, and the ER swallowed us whole. Chapter 4, the ER lights. Hospitals at night don't feel like hospitals. They feel like a different world. Fluorescent lights, beeping monitors, low voices behind curtains. A smell that's half disinfectant, half fear. They rolled my dad past a row of plastic chairs filled with people who looked exhausted and hollow. Dad stared straight ahead, pretending he didn't see them. Like if he didn't look, he couldn't become one of them. At triage, a nurse asked him to confirm his name and birthday. Dad answered sharply, like the questions were insulting. The nurse was kind anyway. That kindness made him angrier. They took him for x-rays, then a CT scan, just to be safe. Just to be safe. Those words always sound simple, until you're the one sitting in the waiting room staring at a vending machine you can't make yourself use. When the doctor finally came out, he was young, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and a calm voice. "Mr. Reynolds?" he asked. Dad lifted his chin. "Yes." The doctor glanced at me. "And you are?" "Jordan, his kid." Dad flinched at kid, like he hated how it shrank him. The doctor spoke carefully. "You have a fractured ankle," he said, "and you hit your head hard enough that we want to observe you overnight." Dad's mouth tightened. "I'm not staying overnight," he said. The doctor didn't argue. He just stayed calm. "I understand," he said, "but concussions can be tricky, and falls like this can lead to complications. I'd strongly recommend observation." Dad scoffed. "I've had worse." The doctor nodded. "I'm sure you have, but you're here now. Let's do this the safe way." Dad turned his eyes to me, sharp. Like this was my fault. Like I had brought him here and chained him to the bed. I wanted to say something reassuring, something gentle. What came out instead was raw. "Dad," I said, "you could have been there all night." His face flickered. Not fear, not sadness, something else. A quick flash of shame. He looked away. The doctor cleared his throat. "We're going to admit you for observation," he said. "Physical therapy will also evaluate you in the morning." Dad's head snapped back. "Physical therapy?" he repeated, like it was an insult. "It's routine," the doctor said. "We want to make sure you can move safely." Dad's laugh was short and sharp. "Sure," he said, "because if I can't, you'll all tell me I can't go home." No one responded. The silence was the answer he feared. And when they wheeled him away, I realized something I didn't want to admit. My dad wasn't afraid of the pain. He was afraid of what the pain meant. Chapter 5, the text started coming. By morning, my phone had become a battlefield. My brother, Miles, texted from Denver. What happened? Is Dad okay? Why didn't you get him help sooner? My sister, Kara, texted from Phoenix. He fell? How bad? Did you call an ambulance? Dad hates hospitals. And then, the worst one. From Miles again, you live closest. This can't keep happening. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. Because he was right. And because he didn't have to live inside it, I went back to my dad's room. He was lying in bed, ankle wrapped, an IV in his arm. The TV was on, muted. He looked smaller in the hospital gown. Not weak, just unarmored. Hey, I said. He didn't look at me. They said PT is coming later, I added. He snorted. Fantastic. They'll teach me how to be old. I sat in the chair beside his bed, careful not to crowd him. I told Miles and Kara, I said. Dad's eyes flicked toward me. Why? Because it's a thing. We're a family. He looked away again. Family. The word sounded like a trap. A nurse came in, cheerful, professional. She explained medications, pain scale, fall precautions. Dad responded to every instruction with the same stiff politeness that meant, I hate this. When she left, Dad said quietly, don't let them talk you into anything. Anything. Meaning rails, meaning home health, meaning maybe you shouldn't live alone. I swallowed. Dad, you were on the floor for 2 hours. He shut his eyes. And I'm not dead, he said. The way he said it, like surviving was proof he was right, made my chest hurt. I lowered my voice. Do you know what I thought when you called? He didn't answer. I thought, what if I don't answer? What if I slept through it? What if... His eyes opened, sharp. You answered. Yeah, I said, this time. His gaze hardened, like he refused to let my fear win. I'm not wearing one of those buttons, he said suddenly. Don't even ask. I almost laughed, because I hadn't asked yet. But he was already defending himself, already fighting the next step. The truth was, my dad didn't fall last night. My dad fell into a new reality, and he was clawing his way out of it with pride as his only weapon. Chapter 6. Rehab was a dirty word. Physical therapy arrived just after lunch. A woman named Denise, strong arms, calm voice, the kind of person who had seen every version of stubborn. She introduced herself, then spoke directly to Dad. We're going to help you stand safely, she said. Dad's mouth tightened. I can stand. Denise nodded. Great. Then let's see it. She guided him to sit up. The moment his ankle shifted, his face tightened. Pain flashed across him quick, involuntary. He hated that I saw it. Denise helped him swing his legs over the side of the bed. On 3, she said. 1, 2, 3. Dad pushed up and wobbled. Just a little, but enough. Denise steadied him and Dad jerked his arm away like her touch was an insult. I've got it, he snapped. Denise didn't flinch. Okay, she said. Walk to the door and back. Dad took 1 step, then another. Then his hand reached for the bed rail fast, reflexive. He caught himself. But he'd reached, and his face went pale with rage. Denise gently guided him back to the bed. Mr. Reynolds, she said, you're going to need a walker temporarily. Dad laughed, bitter. No. It's safer, she said. No. Denise glanced at me, just a brief look, a silent question. Is he always like this? I gave a tiny nod. Denise turned back to Dad. Then we need to discuss short-term rehab. Dad's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Denise didn't argue. She just said it clearly. People fall again after a first fall, especially if they're trying to do too much too soon. Dad's eyes narrowed. And what, he said, is too much? Denise paused, then said the sentence my dad feared most. Living alone without support. Dad's face hardened like stone. I'm going home, he said. The case manager came later, kindly explaining options, home health visits, a few weeks of rehab, safety modifications. Dad listened like a man listening to a verdict. When she left, he turned to me. "You're not signing me into rehab," he said. I stared at him. "I don't want you to fall again," I said softly. He leaned forward, voice low. "And I don't want you to take my life away, one safe decision at a time." There it was. Not anger, not pride, fear. A fear sharpened into a weapon. I swallowed, feeling the weight of every possible wrong choice. If I said yes to rehab, I became the villain. If I said no, and he fell again, I became the fool who should have known better. Dad watched me, waiting, and I realized this wasn't just his battle. He was trying to make it mine. Chapter 7, home didn't feel like home. He went home 2 days later, against recommendations, with paperwork that said things like fall risk and assistance needed. Dad refused to read it. He refused the walker, too. He accepted a cane, only because he could pretend it was temporary. "This is not permanent," he said. I didn't argue, because arguing wasn't the point anymore. The point was keeping him alive long enough to argue later. That first night, I stayed at his house. I made up the guest bed like I used to when Mom was alive. The sheets smelled like laundry detergent and old memories. Dad sat in his recliner, watching TV too loudly. It felt like he was trying to fill the house with sound, so it wouldn't echo. When I suggested leaving a light on in the hallway, he snapped. "I can see." When I suggested a nightstand lamp, he said, "I'm not afraid of the dark." But he didn't say, "I'm afraid of falling again." At 1:40 a.m., I heard it. A soft shuffle, then a pause. Then another shuffle. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. Dad stood near the bathroom, gripping the wall with one hand, cane in the other. He froze when he saw me. Like a teenager caught sneaking out. "I was just going to the bathroom," he muttered. "I know," I said. "I'm not mad." He hated the softness in my voice. I could see it. "Go back to bed," he snapped. "I'm fine." He took another step. His foot slipped just slightly and my entire body tensed like a spring. I reached out, instinctive. Dad jerked away. I said, "I'm fine." His voice cracked, and then he was breathing hard, standing in the hallway, holding onto the wall like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He looked at me, and for a moment, he didn't look like my dad. He looked like a man trying to keep his dignity from falling to the floor. "Dad," I said, quiet, "let me put a nightlight in here." His eyes flashed. "No," he said, "because if you put a nightlight in, then you'll put a rail in. Then you'll put someone in my house. Then you'll—" He stopped, because the next word was too sharp. "Then you'll put me away." He turned his face away from me, jaw clenched, and I finally understood the shape of his refusal. It wasn't about a nightlight. It was about a line he didn't want to cross, because he didn't believe he'd ever get back. Chapter 8, the truth he never said out loud. The next morning, Dad was quieter. Not softer, just tired. He sat at the kitchen table with black coffee, staring at nothing. I washed dishes that didn't need washing, just to keep my hands busy. Finally, Dad said, without looking up, "You know why I hate hospitals?" I paused. "Because they're scary?" I offered. He let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "No," he shook his head slowly, "because hospitals are where you stop being you." I sat down across from him. He didn't meet my eyes. "When I was 16, he said, my dad had a stroke." I went still. He didn't talk about his father often, almost never. "They put him in a rehab facility," Dad continued, "and he hated it. He hated it so much he stopped eating." My throat tightened. Dad tapped his finger against the mug, slow, rhythmic, like he was bracing himself. "I'd visit after school," he said, and he'd grab my hand and whisper, "Get me out." I swallowed. "I couldn't," Dad said, voice flat. "I was a kid. Your grandma couldn't handle him at home. Everyone said it was for the best. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were not angry. They were wounded. They treated him like a problem, he said, like a task, like a room number. I didn't speak. Dad stared at his coffee. And then he died, Dad said. Not from the stroke, not really. He died from being done, from being told his life was over. The kitchen felt too quiet. Dad's voice dropped. I promised myself, he said, I would never let that happen to me. I felt something crack open in my chest. Dad, I started. He lifted a hand, stopping me. And when your mom died, he said, I told myself I had to stay capable, because if I became helpless, then what was left? I took a shaky breath. You're not helpless, I said. He nodded once, sharp. I know. Then softer. But I'm not what I was. That sentence landed like a weight. He stared at his hands. The fall wasn't the worst part, he admitted. The worst part was lying there and realizing I couldn't fix it. I couldn't muscle my way out. I couldn't just stand up. His voice broke on the last words. And suddenly he was not my stubborn father. He was a man staring at the edge of something he couldn't control. He whispered, I was scared you'd come in and look at me, like I'm already gone. My eyes burned. I don't look at you like that, I said. He gave a small, bitter smile. Not yet, he said, but I've seen it happen. I've seen people turn into a project. He looked straight at me then. Jordan, he said quietly, I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want you making decisions about me, like I'm not in the room. My throat tightened, and in that moment, the truth finally became clear. My dad wasn't refusing help because he didn't need it. He was refusing help because he was terrified it would cost him the one thing he had left, the right to choose. Chapter 9, a deal, not a takeover. That afternoon, we made a deal. Not a plan I forced on him. Not a list I handed him like homework. A deal. I slid a notepad across the table. Tell me what you can live with, I said. Dad stared at the paper like it was a trap. Then he said, no nurses. I nodded. Okay, no nurses for now. No rehab. Okay. He squinted at me. You're agreeing too fast. I almost smiled. I'm listening, I said. That's the point. He exhaled. Then I asked, can we do physical therapy? If it's you going somewhere, not someone coming here. Dad hesitated. Then, reluctantly, maybe. Can we install a nightlight? I asked. Not because you're old, because you don't want to fall again. His jaw tightened, but he nodded once. Can we add a grab bar? I asked. Not the ugly hospital kind, the kind that looks like a towel bar. Dad frowned, thinking, fine, he said. And I added carefully, can we do an alert system? His eyes narrowed. No button necklace, he said immediately. What about a watch? I offered. Like a smartwatch, something you'd wear anyway. Dad stared at me for a long moment. Then he muttered, that's different. I didn't push. I just wrote it down. We talked about choices. He chose which handyman to call. He chose where the nightlights went. He chose the PT clinic. And then this surprised me most, he chose a neighbor. Mrs. Delgado next door. Dad cleared his throat, not meeting my eyes. I'll give her a spare key, he said. Just in case. Just in case. His version of surrender. A week later, the nightlights were installed. The grab bar was up. Dad wore the watch complaining about it the entire time, like complaining proved it hadn't beaten him. Feels like house arrest, he grumbled. But he wore it. And in the evenings, we practiced. Sit. Stand. Slow steps with the cane. Breathing through frustration. Some days he snapped. Some days I snapped back. But something had shifted. He wasn't fighting help anymore. He was fighting the feeling of losing himself. And now, I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to stay with him inside the fight without taking the fight away. Chapter 10, The Call That Changed Everything. 3 months later, my phone rang at 2:17 p.m. Not 2:17 a.m. Daylight, safe. Dad flashed on the screen. I answered, bracing anyway. Hey. His voice was normal, a little gruff, a little proud. I need a ride, he said. I blinked. To where? To the barber. I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. You want me to drive you? To the barber? I repeated. Yeah, he said. My ankle's still not perfect, and if I take a spill in the parking lot, you'll never shut up about it. I laughed quiet, surprised. Okay, I said. What time? 4, he said. Then, after a beat, like he had to force it past his pride. And thanks. My chest tightened. He didn't say thank you often. Not because he wasn't grateful, because he was from a generation that thought gratitude made you weak. I swallowed. You're welcome, I said. After the call, I sat on my couch and stared at nothing. Because the thing that hit me wasn't the barber. It was the fact that he'd asked. He didn't wait for a fall. He didn't wait for the floor. He asked before he needed to be rescued. That night, at his kitchen table, Dad sipped coffee and watched me write something on my phone. What are you doing? He asked. Setting reminders, I said. PT on Tuesdays, your follow-up appointment, and a check-in with Mrs. Delgado. Dad grunted. Bossy. I looked up at him. Still you, I said. He paused. Then his mouth twitched like he was fighting a smile. Yeah, he said. Still me. Outside, the porch light clicked on as the sun went down. The hallway nightlight glowed softly, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for disaster. I felt prepared. Not because I had control, but because my dad, my stubborn, proud, terrified dad, had finally admitted something that sounded simple, but was actually brave. Help wasn't the enemy. Losing himself was, and now we were fighting that together. Not with fear, with choice, with respect, and with a quiet kind of love that says, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere.